Germany just elected Friedrich Merz, a former BlackRock executive, as the Prime Minister of Germany. Congratulations on BlackRock for winning once again another Western election. The AfD came in second place, and their leader is from Goldman Sachs. What a great democracy you have there, Germany. BlackRock and Goldman Sachs interests are undefeated in every single Western election, to the point where they are cutting out the middleman and directly installing their own people themselves. We have witnessed Europe descend into pure fascism, the merging between the corporation and the state. In Western democracies, you are only given the illusion of choice. If you live in Germany, for example, and you want to end your state support for the genocidal actions of Israel, who do you vote for? Every single major party in Germany is captured by the Zionist regime. Friedrich Merz criticized Olaf Scholz, the former prime minister, for not supporting Israel enough. Olaf Scholz literally cracked down on pro-Palestinian protests and armed Israel to the teeth as they committed their genocide in Gaza. But according to Friedrich Merz, that wasn't enough. The reason why Friedrich Merz is so passionate about Israel and defending their genocide in Gaza is because BlackRock directly profits off of the genocide of the Palestinians. The same way that BlackRock benefits from the war in Ukraine, BlackRock directly profits from war, violence, and instability in the world, which is why they are now installing their own Western leaders in order to guarantee it. Brian Stelter from CNN claims that the true reason why Americans are turning against the Ukraine war is because we're too stupid to actually realize that the Ukraine war boosts the military-industrial complex.
Explicitly, it's pretty obvious what's happening. Some of this, I fear, is about illiteracy on the part of the voters, not knowing, for example, about the spending that's going to Ukraine that's actually funding American technology, right? Funding American manufacturing plants. And by the time you do learn those facts, it's too late.
Said like a man whose salary is paid by arms manufacturers. This is exactly why pro-war, pro-NATO progressives like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Ilhan Omar, who claims we are fighting a war in Ukraine for democracy and because we want to defend the Ukrainian people, are youthful idiots at best. Meanwhile, neocons in the Democratic Party openly admit that the Ukraine war is beneficial because we can weaken Russia while only sacrificing Ukrainians.
You're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine.
They also love how they can use Ukrainians as war guinea pigs as a way to test new battlefield innovations and new weapon systems. This is exactly why the left is supposed to oppose the Ukraine war, unlike the NATO sellout left led by Bernie Sanders and European Green Party. The left is supposed to advocate for peace and oppose war that benefit the military-industrial complex and the ruling class geopolitical war games. The plan of the Democratic Party to oppose Donald Trump is to defend the military-industrial complex, propose never-ending war against Russia, and defend failed institutions while avoiding class issues. The Democratic Party is completely cooked.
What's poppin'? My friends, my family, we are back once again. Welcome to Nick at Noon. We have another banger show, another banger guest. You guys already know what time it is, banger after banger. I got to post my speech too. I don't know if you guys saw, because it was a large event. Big shout out to Due Distance for covering it. I was on Due Distance show as well, giving a speech at Worker Strike Back. I gotta find time to post on our channel. I feel like it went pretty well. I think the crowd reacted pretty well too. I wish I could do it live. You guys know I'm way better at giving speeches and talking live instead of just recording a video and live stream. Live stream is actually pretty awkward. I'm way better in person. But in the video, I explained how we have to be there as movement builders, as revolutionaries for the people who will inevitably be disappointed by the duopoly once again. And we're already seeing it. We're already seeing a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump and MAGA who are furious. We're going to talk about the Trump AI video in Gaza. And he's getting a lot of heat from a lot of people in the MAGA right over that. And it's wild because this is this dynamic. Why? I don't think highly of MAGA, but they're way more critical of their guy than liberals ever was of genocide Joe Biden. I give them that at least. But right now we have MAGA who is flailing, but Donald Trump is more popular than he's ever been because we have no effective opposition. We have Democrats, and I don't know if I can play this video. I know. But I saw this and I'll tweet this out. I tweeted out how John Oliver was decrying the lack of censorship. And now you have comedians, you have the entirety of the liberal, even the progressive left, Bernie Sanders, sounding like a crazed neocon, criticizing Donald Trump because he want to pursue peace in Ukraine. Out of everything you can go after MAGA for, which we will in this stream, they're attacking Donald Trump, promoting never-ending war with Russia, flanking him from his right, while doing everything they can to avoid class issues, which they are substituting with defending corrupt institutions. That's their strategy to oppose MAGA. So there are liberals who are frustrated as well because of the current failed resistance of the Democratic Party. So you have MAGA, you have a few people who are patriots who want the best for their country, who was misled by Trump, who realized it was conned. Then now you have Democrats who realize their party is feckless. It's the perfect situation for us, which was my message at Workers' Strike Back. But I want to bring my guest in. We follow each other on X. I'm looking forward to having Ryan on for the first time because he's also, I would describe as post-duopoly, the last America vagabond. Ryan Christian is joining us today. I appreciate you joining us. I want to get your thoughts on my opening monologue, your impressions of the Donald Trump administration around 1 month in, because we're seeing, obviously he's advocating for peace in Ukraine, but he's have a very blatant strategy of he wanted to avoid Ukraine and focus more on the Middle East, help establish greater Israel, promote war with China. But I would love to get your thought on the first month of the Trump regime as we begin.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's what I think is important for all sides and people that are in the paradigm, people that see through the two-party illusion, is right now more than ever we need to be looking for outcome. Right? Even people that mean what they say, there's plenty of reasons we all know why things may not come to pass, even though they may want them. Even more so, we know they lie all the time about things to get people invested in their agenda. So, right, as more than ever, let's wait to see things happen. And I think we all know that in most cases, but we get caught up in different fervor. And so I like what you were framing there in the beginning. First, I want to note on what you said. It's actually interesting to look at that. That's an interesting way to see that, because I do agree that I of the mind there are more Republicans right now that are uncomfortable about, let's say conservatives, because that's the way I tend to put the line, even though there's clearly an overlap of the team sport Republicans who just, it's all about the agenda, no facts don't matter, versus a lot of conservatives that I think just don't know what else to do, that are like uncomfortable with the 45 different things we can go over, mRNA shots and artificial intelligence and all these different things that are coming out that they thought they were fighting. They just don't know. They've convinced that the other side is just that much worse. And so they just kind of don't know what to do. What's funny is that you're right to say that I do think, and I agree, that a lot of Republicans are crying foul right now. But even after the video we can touch on, but a lot of other things so far. And interestingly, I do agree that I think I would argue you're right, that I saw less of that kind of pushback at moments when it was very clear, I'd say during the COVID-19 timeframe. However, I would argue that in the Israel conversation, I did see a lot of Democrats push back against it's an easier conversation because the Democrats have a much more, I guess nuance is a bad word for it, but they're both the same support for Israel. They just have a different way they flavor that. But I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. And my point would be that I think it's because our government play the two-party illusion, which I think you agree with, to get us in a very clear position. And that's just a government, right? They play the flavors of both sides to get us in a clear position. And so when you look at all these different things, or, arguing over what's going to happen in Ukraine, to me, it's about the people in these arguments. The government has one clear agenda there for the most part. Now, I could obviously be wrong, but that's how I see it. And so to point out, the point you made with Ukraine, it's interesting to see, because clearly we see a deviation in strategy, at least narrative wise. I mean, generally strategy as well, but I think it's time. Like if the time right now was right for Biden's administration to do something similar, they probably would have done the same. But my point is that they're calling for something they frame as peace. Originally, it was end the war in 24 hours. That didn't happen, but I don't think anybody truly thought that was going to be that easy or that would happen that way. But then it becomes something else that kind of spins out for a second where they start arguing about, like there was that little spat between Zelensky and Trump, and then all of a sudden they have a deal, and the EU swings in and says, we have a better deal. Bottom line, it turns out, as I'm sure you've seen, that now they've made an agreement with the United States for minerals. So all that is narrative, and I mean, there's actions happening. But if you just stand back and look at it, outside of the back and forth and all the different shows, Biden, Trump, what actually amounted to is that they took control of the country effectively. Resources, occupation, NATO soldiers on the ground. And then on top of that, what didn't happen was the end of the war, because now they're going to have security guarantees for U.S. personnel on the ground for Ukraine. Now, what Russia does in response is interesting. I'm waiting to see what that might show. If they do nothing, I think that actually speaks more than anything else. But to me, that's not ending anything. That might very well be exactly what this was all about. And now Israel is actively going to push more in, and they're already involved. They've been funding the Azov movement for a very long time. And take Syria, for example. Look at how that ended up. The United States is acting like this is an important effort all this time, all the resources. And that's just not the United States, a lot of countries. And now what happens? A terrorist group is in charge. And now who's on the ground? Israel's on the ground. Israel's building bases. Israel's deployed troops. You can't miss what that shows you. So opening point, I just think that we are being misled in very many different egregious ways. But I think the partisan part is what we really need to, chop away at more than anything today.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. And I had a prediction in the very beginning. We'll see, because I think Putin and Russia legitimately would like to have peace with the West. So they are going at this very cautiously. And I said in the very beginning, because I read Trump's initial peace plan, where he said he wanted EU peacekeepers. And he put all these demands where I'm like, why would Russia agree to any of these? So it's on point to be skeptical of Trump's positioning in the beginning of this.
Well, let me add one point to what you said right there, though. I actually think that the reason that makes sense, if it plays out this way, hypothetically, if you saw this revert back to the original borders, and well, even more so, even I was going to say allow the Donbass area to be part of Russia, which is what ultimately one of the hard lines for Russia, because let's be real, they were being ethnically cleansed by the U.S. Israeli-backed Azov movement on the ground. So the interesting part, though, is a large part of the resource interest is there, but there's still a lot more in Ukraine in general. So I would argue that if Trump allowed Russia to, arguably do the only thing it really wanted to do in this situation is protect that and secure its borders, and then U.S. gained from the occupation of Ukraine and Israel, well, they both kind of get what they want. And the only thing that actually changed in all of it was the destruction of Ukraine, the decimation of any semblance of a country other than the way they always prop these things up today. And then also you have the Syria dynamic, which I think one of the main issues was keeping Russia kind of mired with this conversation in Syria. But then, they used that to long story short, there's so many angles over the process of the Syrian dynamic, but ended up taking control of it. And I think that's the way they played this. And now that many of these agendas are sort of no longer necessary, that we're going to see the resolution of it. Now, I can make one more point actually on this. This is one thing I'm really worried about, is that there are in some cases positive outcomes that are happening. Like I cheered on his, even though it's executive order, I wish it would have been something more secure and long lasting, but the executive order around women's sports, I agree with that. But the point's the same, is that if you don't do these things the right way, it's not going to actually be lasting. And my worry is that good things are being done in order to sort of mask a much larger problem. Now, it's interesting because people are so afraid to have that conversation, like we just can't accept a win. It's like, well, no, we already said that's a win. Good thing. But additionally, two separate conversations, could this also not be happening? And the fact that people don't want to consider that is kind of alarming to me. And so back to this Middle East point, I see that happening a lot, where yes, maybe this rolls down to an end of what's the Ukraine war, which everybody should be happy about, because Ukrainians are just suffering in mass, and same with Russians involved with this or anybody else being pulled in. But what else is happening around it? You know what I mean? Like with Syria and the different shifting, even the Greater Israel Project, they have an eye on Ukraine right now. And so I think we just have to always be open to that way they shift the game in front of us, Yeah,
and that's how they manipulate otherwise anti-establishment people to vote for red team, blue team, by saying, hey, don't you know I had an executive order to ban trans people from sports? Like, they use these culture war issues to get people to vote for extreme evil and people who do not have their class interests at heart.
Yeah, well,
Right
that's a
now,
good point. The whole DEI woke mindset, right, is like that's the way. I mean, I even did a whole show about this where, I mean, again, I think we can all argue that this is a problematic thing. And let's also be clear that the woke right, in a very slightly different way, or very clear, same dynamic exists. The same culture wars, same identity politics, the same censorship based on certain words. It's all there. It's just a different flavor, and neither one really wants to acknowledge that they're so similar. But so the problem is, though, is that they go after these things because we all generally acknowledge that, like, I mean, actually, I'm not sure exactly your full view on the nuances of all these conversations. My opinion is that, like the transgender conversation, obviously this was weaponized, it's problematic. What was happening was simply wrong. I'm not to say that people can't make their own choices. I mean, in the context of children, in the context of these harmful actions that were being taken. So we all seem to mostly agree with that. And so it's easy to see that this was diminishing. And now the evidence is even caught up in a lot of ways. The W path, the main location that was being promoted as like the central location, these have gone away, and now they're rolling things back in the UK to only being in certain trials. And they're basically admitting that we were all right. And so it's already on the decline. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be fighting it. It's a bad thing. But the same idea I was just talking about is then they frame it as woke politics and we're fighting DEI and we're fighting the pronouns. Well, what's around that? What was USAID doing? They weren't spreading pronouns and woke politics. They were using that as a cover for the regime change tactics, right? And so it's interesting to see how that works. So if all you're doing is feigning going after what you pretend is the only point, while underneath the woke politics, you're still building out the Great Reset, then you're just being played, right? So both those things can both be bad at the same time. Just acknowledge that this is window dressing, right? The people that believed in these things that were rolling them out to, whatever the same tokens they keep pointing to, the Panama drag show, whatever the things they say they found in USAID. It's like, obviously these were not the goal. It wasn't about spreading woke ideology, in my opinion. It was about what they were doing around that, or it's a means to an end. And that's my opinion, but I think we're seeing
I think that's the tool that many people on the right use to trick a lot of poor white people as well. Because people, please remember, because you explain accurately that it's a game that both sides play, and there's a lot of people on the right that siding with billionaires and millionaire imperialists, right, Zionists, because they feel like there's this conspiracy of the liberal wing of the ruling class trying to impose transgenderism on the American people, and what I think it is just the Democrats playing their part in the culture war game.
Exactly.
Like Barack Obama, for example, and I'll pass it right back to you.
No, go ahead.
Barack Obama was against gay marriage when he ran for president.
Right.
So do people really believe that Chuck Schumer, for example, some boomer, that all these boomers in Congress have a legitimately strong belief in trans people in sports? Like, for example, do you guys really believe that they have a strong will to advocate? No, they purposely pick things that they know will upset a large part of the country. They uplift that. Then you have the right who play their part of highlighting the quote unquote crazy left. Then they get riled with the crazy left. Then the left get upset. The right. It's a game they use to constantly get people to argue on the margins of the culture wars, which is why I mentioned in my speech at Working Strike Back that it's our job, at least my position. I'm someone who opposed our duopoly, a revolutionary. We need to convince people to get their way out of that, to convince themselves not to keep their eye on the ball and realize that we have differences. We are a giant country, hundreds of millions of people. We have all these different cultural differences that we cannot reconcile through politics.
Right.
It's something that you can reconcile by meeting with people. Like, for example, if I don't mean to go on the rant, but if you're like gay or trans, and you meet someone, it may be uncomfortable, but they may not understand your life. But then as you talk, they may be more receptive.
Right.
The same as white people who are racist, they tend to be racist because they don't hang around black people. The more you conversate with black people and you talk to them, the more racist. That's the only way we can really handle it.
Right.
There's no political solution. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we need to focus less on it. Just me speaking in general. Focus less on those cultural differences that we can't fight over and finish and find a solution via politics. Build community based on those differences and learn how to connect with one each other, improve our material conditions despite those differences. And that is not what the ruling class want. I apologize for the rant, but you said a lot of things that were thought provoking. I would love to pass it to you if you have anything else you want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get back on topic.
No, man, please. I am all about the engrossing long-term conversation, man. I think that's what we missed today in a lot of these things. But it's a great point, and I think that I mean, look, obviously there are cultural, ideological differences. And even what I think you were hinting at too, even amongst people that are who are the same color, who have the same religion, who have the same political background. It's just about nuance. And the problem is that they try to frame and weaponize very clear differences only in certain divisive ways. Like, for example, here's a great example. I don't even know if this is ever going to come to pass or not. But Donald Trump wrote an executive order about bringing the Afrikaners or Afrikaneers, whatever they call themselves, from South Africa and putting them in a settlement inside the United States or in some kind of U.S.-owned territory. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is at a time, I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with the dynamic of the South Africa, what's going, Elon Musk and supporting of that and all that. The point is basically it's just a continuation of the apartheid South Africa, but now in reverse, where you've got the point is nobody should be supporting racial violence. I mean, that's obvious. But what's crazy is that we're at a time when they're telling you about immigration. The larger Republican side is saying like, no, and there's a problem. We can't just let immigrants in. Assimilation's the problem. Finances. I mean, there's valid points to all of this, but it's being weaponized. What's interesting is at a time when you're talking about that, because you make the claim that somehow these brown people are the only ones that we have an issue being assimilated with, you talk about white South Africans who are very different culturally. Assimilation will be very different. I mean, it's just the fact that the only difference is that they're white. I just want to point out how ridiculous it is that it's simply a decision to go, well, that one will make sense and this one won't, because you've been convinced that somehow Palestinians or whatever else we're talking about, despite all of this being the responsibility, or rather the reason it's happening is because of U.S. foreign policy, that they just are somehow treated differently because they have, it's all propaganda is the point. And so at the end of the day, if you can simply decide one's okay and one's not, and the same logic applies, then it's just hypocrisy. And this is the real thing I'm seeing so often today, is that across the paradigm, across the partisanship on both sides, and we all see this, there's deliberate and willful effort to just disregard what makes their side look bad and lean into what the other side. And this is why right now most of these Republicans that are acting like they're winning somehow while they roll out the Great Reset is that they just make themselves feel good because they're making fun of Democrats. Look, Trump came out and he dunked on this Democrat, or this bill makes them look stupid, and so we're winning. Or the same point where we stand like Milei and Trump go to speak at World Economic Forum for Davos. Like, how crazy that is. And all they do is go, look, he challenged them. He said woke pronouns are bad and said the Paris climate thing is a no good. Oh, what about everything else? What about the fact that they're supporting the entire, but no, he said pronouns are bad, so we're winning. That's the point you're making. I agree. It's like it's a shell game. Those things should be addressed, but this is not the real fight, man. And I think that's how this always works. It's the shell game.
Yeah, the ruling class spent a lot of time and a lot of money to convince people to treat politicians like celebrities,
right?
To treat the struggle, politics, what I would define as class warfare, to treat that just as a team sport. We had what side of the oligarchy do you want to choose? You want the red team to win? You want the blue team to win? And it's always hilarious when partisans get upset at me, because I love that you go after both sides hard. I do the same. I always have Trump supporters complain at me. I have liberals who complain at me, and they say, "Hey, like Nick, why do you hate everybody? Why you hate like any of these teams winning does not mean a victory for the working class. Does not mean victory for us. You have to have principles that you stand on,
right?
And I have this almost spiritual belief. I think most people do, and I'm speaking more in a toxic masculinity way. Like, I have like a strong urge to make things better for the youths in my family. I look at my niece, I look at my younger cousins. Like, and to me, abdicating that, like just saying, "Oh, our government corrupt, no, we can do about it. I'm gonna just pick one team. I know things not gonna get better." That is that's a baffling decision to me. And I don't have kids. Like imagine you have children and you are willing to pass on the corrupt world to them. That you're not willing to uphold your values and reflect on the government. And then you have the gall to call yourself a patriot as you cheer for one corrupt side. You know what I mean, Ryan? But go ahead if you want to try.
No, the problem is just that they're convinced that they are doing that. And that's what's so infuriating about it, is they just it's all about the narrative and what they point to and the meme he just shared, as opposed to their entire history of what they've done in their career, their life, their political dynamic, or what they've done so far. And it's like, oh, well, give him a chance. It's like, I did, and I am. I'm looking at his entire track record and everything he's done so far since he's been in this position for the second time. And still, but just give him another year. That's the kind of thing. And it's all about the idea that a lot of them, oh, well, he says he's a Christian, so I believe he's a good person. It's like a childlike belief in these people. I mean, you can look at their past rhetoric, their books, they don't believe in half of what they claim they do, And your point about hating everyone is so interesting because they're not even in the majority. And I think this is quite obvious. Like we know this every year, right? We see what I think it's something like 40 something percent are the people that are voting left and right. And usually within that, most of them register as independent, but still choose to vote left and right, which is ridiculous. But the point is the other 56% of the country don't engage with the broken system. And so I can't speak to what they know or think, or, maybe they just don't care at all. But to pretend that we hate everybody because we're focusing on the partisanship is actually an illusion, right? We're siding with the majority at this point that we think it's broken and doesn't work.
Yeah, and once again, the argument is false on its face. If you guys didn't know, look at all the people we have on our show, like Ryan, for example. Look at the activists that we bring up. I have a side I root for. It's the working class. It's the activists. The Democrats and the Republicans are the exact opposite. For example, Democrats was wishing death upon the families of Palestinians. They was fantasizing about Palestinians being murdered by Israel because how dare you oppose our Queen Kamala? These are people who take the side of the ruling class,
right, before
they take the side of activists. There were a lot of people who was upset at me because I was willing to have a conversation with the American Communist Party, because I don't have disdain towards people I have disagreed with on the working class level, the people without power. I have disdain towards people with power. I will bring Ro Khanna on our show, and I will grill his ass like I did on why he support war. Among the working class, among everyone else, we need to have grace. We need to have communication and understanding instead of this psyop. I'm speaking to all these fake Twitter communists who advocate staying in silos. Oh, how don't you know this guy's he's a fascist. That guy's a fascist. Your neighbor's a fascist. Everyone's a fucking fascist. Let's not have a conversation. I reject that. Like, I didn't even know your ideology. Zoya, Ryan, cool as fuck. We followed you on Twitter. All right, bet, let's bring him on. Democrat, Republican, there needs to be more of that. And it's crazy to me that people are against that basic dialogue. But Brian, I'll pass to you and we get back to the topic. But anything else you want to say?
No, yeah, that's important, and that speaks to your integrity. That it's about, you should be able and willing, and it seems like we're more in line with most things than not, but that willing to talk with people that have different ideas. That's the only way you learn something. But just in case for people don't know, my opinion is I think they're all bad. I'm anti-government, whether communism, fascism, democracy. I think that government is the reason that we're all here, and each evolution of it is trying to find a way to make that government work for us. And I think it's never designed to. I think government is the problem. But my point has always been that if we're forced to live in a situation where that's the reality, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail my life to make that not the case, but in a non-violent way, because that's what I'm always preaching, is that if we're forced to be here, I've often pointed to something like the Constitution, where I'm saying this is one of the best things I can see in a government scenario in history that at least gives us some tools to be able to fight for some kind of control over the system. And obviously we've seen that taken away from us left and right. And you can see that things like communism or socialism are reactions to that centralization of power. But I think my opinion is that, and I'm sure your audience might disagree with this, but that either way it goes, all of them, whether it's socialism, democracy, fascism, all of them are capable of centralizing power, and where we lose and you could say the reverse too, that all of them are capable of being something that could work. The problem is that it always ends up centralizing power. I mean, look at what we pretend. I mean, we at one point at least claimed we started as a constitutional republic. Then we just started calling it democracy. And either way, whatever one you think makes more sense, the point is neither of those are true. The point, though, is that we clearly can see that it has centralized power, despite the fact that we tell ourselves that we're immersed in this and we're making choices, and yet here we are, And so I just think people need to at least stand back and have an engaging conversation about, is it possible to have a world without government? And the last point on that is just think about, we do all these things, guys. The government is simply an overarching hand dictating action. The people that build the roads are the same people that do that now. The people in the military, those people still exist. The point is about the centralized dynamic of it. And then the nuances to what level you think, there's even within like an anarchistic belief, there's all huge scale of, to what degree of a lot of different things. I think that we're at a point where that conversation start being had actually. But it's people are scared of it.
Very interesting point. I want to add this. I would just love to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm a communist and I believe, because you're talking about you believe in the natural evolution of society, and that's what we initially argue, is that communist revolution is the natural evolution of a proletariat being upset with the ruling class.
Right.
They're upset with revolutions of the past. And once again, I would just love to hear your thoughts on this. This is we don't have to debate. I would just love to hear back and forth on this. Our ideology believes that once the temperature gets too hot, once the inevitable happens, the scientific betrayal of the ruling class against the proletariat, which is, you can see this throughout history, the peasantry being manipulated, sent to war, being killed on behalf of the proletariat. Many revolutions went wrong because instead of overthrowing the capitalist class and the ruling class, they replaced that with another one.
Right.
And they just create the same feudalist system.
Right.
So what we aspire to, and many people have failed, there are people, as like Kwame Ture said, there are people who have failed socialism. But what we advocate for, instead of the revolution that go fascist, we need a revolution that take out the ruling class and give the power back to the people. And there will always be a self-correcting system, a self-correcting system that is way more efficient instead of having a profit-driven mode. But that's the natural evolution that we call for. The evolution that leads to the people actually having power. The proletariat having power. Anyway, we don't have a theoretical debate about it. I'll give you last thought. Right. We get some topics.
No, I find it interesting, and I honestly, I think that despite my kind of, it's almost like, in a way, I think we see things very similarly, but it's just that I mean, here, the interesting thing is you can see the things over the years, and you're right. I mean, you can see that the response to a centralized power, like a fascistic or, imperial type government, then if somebody presents an idea where the people have more power than that centralized thing, it's obviously it's a natural reaction to lean against that, right? But then the same thing over history, you can see that then you have different dynamics, and there's also points to make that there's examples of countries that go either way that don't devolve and haven't devolved into some absolute hellscape, and maybe they will eventually. The point, though, is that many times, and I think this is just the way power structures work, and then my point is that whatever it is, the power structure seeks more power, is that ultimately then people, once you end up in a communist type society that ends up becoming centralized, is all history. In history, they always do, then the people then respond in the other way. Right. Where it's like, well, now it's the same problem. We want something where there's more, and it goes back and forth. And I'm not a historian on this topic. Maybe you can school me on the history of where it might have gone.
It's an interesting thought, but we can move on.
Let me just finish my thought. Is all I was saying is that ultimately that you can see that teeter-totter continues. And so the only central line in my mind, the only central common thread is government, is the idea that we always seem to think we need somebody to rule over our lives, which is ultimately what it means. Even if it's a, to blank on the term for like the UK, like a, more so of like a constitutional republic dynamic, even that can still be manipulated like we're seeing with like an Israel dynamic where they're just buying off people in certain positions, even a rotating dynamic. But it's worth interesting, discussing. And I like conversations like this.
Yeah. I like to hear your perspective as well. One thing to consider is, and I think the root of corruption, I believe a lot of people agree with, is that whenever you have an oligarch, whenever you have a capitalist that is more powerful than the collective, that is the root of corruption.
Right.
Like when you have the capitalist class that has more power than a governing body, that is what leads to mistrust. For example, I'll give you a real world example of this. Why was a lot of people distrustful of the COVID vaccine? A lot of people were distrustful of the COVID vaccine because we believe the government wasn't telling stuff that was in our best interest because they were trying to make profit for Pfizer. How is that possible? Because Pfizer has more power than the government. That's what happens when you have a capitalist institution more powerful than government. It leads to distrust because every single decision the government make, you think is behalf on the capitalist class. So that's the mindset of why we want to get to the root cause of corruption. That's just our theory of the case. There are people who failed to actually successfully root that out. I think China is a great example of the corrupt capitalist class being brought to heel, even though they're not perfect themselves. But the fact that they execute and go after billionaires and they crack down on corruption is a great model, even though it's not perfect. But that's I'll give you last thought on this topic and we can move on just for the sake of time. But I would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, no, just what are your thoughts on like the technocratic element of it? Because this is what I like, logically you can see that, like, it's kind of the same thing we're saying is that the response tends to be, kind of pushing away from what they see as the centralized idea that's controlling their lives. But what I've noticed over the years, and this is what we always have to think about, is that the ruling class are students of humanity, right? They're watching the way that we respond, the way that we act, especially with the technological age. And so we have to at least ask whether or not the mob in its own right is weaponized in that same way, that you could convince people that they are in that kind of society, but then just basically through a lot of different means that they are capable of manipulate that mob mentality, and so it's this again, my point's the same. I think government is the problem, but I understand why the reaction becomes the same. And I just think it's interesting with the technocratic element of it. And I want your thoughts on, if you want to get into it, like that with technocracy, right? How does that change the dynamic? Like, I think we're getting to a point to where if they successfully roll out what they're rolling out, that they won't care whether they pull the mask off anymore, that it'll just be straight up, authoritarian control, so it's like that's kind of the problem we're all trying to fight against right now.
The technocrats, the people in tech, they realize that they have to go to the next phase, which is what we warn about in communist theory. The next phase is whenever the corporations merge with the state. So what are the tech bros doing now? They're just becoming government. I just covered how Germany, the banks and banksters, they decide, fuck the middleman, let's just join the government. That's the inevitable reaction of a never-ending profit system. Once you extract everything you can via the private system, via exploitation of the worker, you have to go to government next. This is the scare of fascism and the technocratic. I agree with all your analysis about it. Like, whenever I hear libertarians talk about it, like I hear libertarians talk about the technocratic state all the time. Like, man, they are nailing it. The only difference is we believe that as the inevitable result, allowing the capitalist class to determine the means of production. But Ron, I would love you last thought. That's just my thoughts on the journal. We have a few topics I want to get to during the conversation. I want to get to this. Let's get to this first, because this is the main topic of the day. I just want to get to these just so I'm not like clickbaiting people because this is the story that I have in the headline. I would love to have. Maybe I should do a panel with maybe like two libertarians, me and a Marxist friend. We just have a conversation. That'd be fun. I think that was very.
I really do think it's an important, that, like I was saying a second ago, is that for some reason, I mean, it's obvious why, because it's been weaponized, like we're talking about, but it becomes so contentious, and because some people argue, communism is the devil, and then fascism, everyone has their opinion about which. Obviously, my mind is they all can amount to the same outcome, and it's just about which one they want you to hate. So I think it's important for people like us to have like a measured, balanced, not contentious, amicable conversation. So, because that's the only time you learn something new, Anyway, I'm glad we talked about it. But so, because I have a lot to learn in a lot of this stuff. But this one is so interesting because it's another example of what we were talking about before, right? That we have a lot of these ideas of things that are being suggested or promised or floated, and it's more about the narrative and the fact that they claim this. I mean, people were like #winning when they simply said they were going to do this. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't even happen yet. They're like, we did it. It's like, come on, guys. Let's wait to see if it actually happens. Like they floated the JFK files, like what, twice now, I think, like in earnest. And Trump pretended to put more out last time. And we're like, well, that didn't really change the story. So in this, it's interesting because there's two parts to it. One is that the list, in my opinion, is transparently let's just say like the information. It's not one piece of paper, right? Just the files on this. Yeah. It's clearly bipartisan. I mean, and whether you want to ignore the Trump overlap or whatever else, don't make it about one person, because that's where people get, their hero worship. The point is that we can clearly see that it's a partisan thing. It's all of it, right? It is clearly from both sides of this. And that is because it's a CIA, Mossad sexual blackmail network. And they were aiming at this to influence the politicians. And look what's happening right now. Biden says he's a proud Zionist, and now you have a literal Zionist, like prophetic, biblical, like, what was it? Hegseth said they have a biblical right to that land. These are people at the highest level of power. So now we've got this list that I think includes a lot of the people in the inner circles of this. And so, or the information therein, if it's actually even there. And so now it hasn't come out. And so the promise was yesterday, right? And so even some of their inner circles going like, why is that not out? And so there's only one real point to point out there. If it was a list, and it was, as they keep kind of feigning, that it's the Democrats, which is clearly just not, then why wouldn't they just dump it out there? If their game is full transparency or just their agenda and that we want to show everything. Well, the only reason they would do that is because there's something on that they don't want us to see. How do you make sense of that? Aren't we fighting the deep state? Is that what they claim? So if you're going to hide somebody for national security, then that's the deep state, right? Yes. Or all of them involved. But I don't think this will ever come out in earnest. And if it does, I don't know how we'd ever be able to prove that it was the full amount of information.
There's reports of now the FBI deleting. A whistleblower apparently said they're deleting files on the Epstein list. I wouldn't trust anything they release at this point. You make a great point, because of course, if you're going to have a Mossad honeypot scheme, you're not going to just go after one party. So this is definitely something that afflicts both sides. That's why it's always hilarious. This is a story that many partisans struggle with a lot here, and it's obvious that something was shady. They wanted to hide this because they said this is the story of the Rolling Cloud. They said we have this guy who was a serial sex trafficker, and we have all these victims who was victims of sex trafficking and all these sex crimes that Jeffrey Epstein was guilty of, but he had no clients. We're not going to name the clients. We like who. There has to be a clientele list,
right?
And that was something that the government will obviously protecting. And this is something that is pretty shady that the Biden administration didn't release this.
Right.
Like there's even had to be pressure about who was the people that was working with Epstein. And to me, it's obvious they don't want to relist this because it will implicate some very important people.
Right.
People like Alan Dershowitz has been exposed as being Mossad. He had deep connections with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein used to meet with former Israeli prime ministers and member of the Knesset. Mm-hmm. Surely just a coincidence, guys. But Ryan, anything else you want to add? I'll just show some headlines here. Trump administration called out for sitting on Epstein client list. What are you waiting for? This is the headline I had up while you were speaking. Mm-hmm. When this is all the hype, and they use it, like once again, Trump is a smart politician. His team is smart. They use it to win the election. So and they're like, all right, we handle the demand for this afterwards. Our number one concern is to beat Kamala Harris. We worry about the aftermath afterwards. Then they won the election. Then they're like, oh fuck, we gotta deal with this Epstein thing. Well, go ahead, Ryan. I think you want to chime in. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because it's fair to point out that and this is how this I think it's concerning to me because it's easy to feel like this is going in the right direction, and maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but that Biden or anybody before they never made an effort to reveal anything. And that's worth pointing out. But now we have Trump and them coming in, and now again, it hasn't happened yet. So there's no going, but Trump's doing something he didn't. Nope, they haven't gotten there yet, right? But if it does come out, even something, I still think it's worth pointing out that, well, that's more than Biden ever did. But see, this is the game, is people that are on Trump's side pretend we're fighting for the other side. We're not. I'm simply going, neither of them are on your side. So all I'm highlighting is that he didn't do anything. Yep, government bad. And here's Trump doing something, so government a little bit better. But what's the point is whether they're going to use limited information to get you where they want you in this position, or to pretend that, this is classic manipulation. And then it goes back to the larger point of whether we think this administration in any way, shape, or form represents even slightly anything they pretended it was going to be. I mean, this is like the insider of insiders administration. It's a Zionist-packed administration. They're rolling out the technocratic agenda. I mean, it's like the exact diametric opposite of everything they talked about, from the lobbyist dynamic, from the defense contractors. I mean, everything. So that doesn't show you an indication that they're fighting anything other than people that might be fighting their agenda. So maybe even ask that. How about, what's the likelihood they could release a list of people that aren't on the Epstein list, but just they want to take down? Can't we even consider that's possible? Like, how are we ever going to prove that this information comes out? I would have said the same thing when Biden did it, right? It's the same point. But so this is what's so concerning for me is now we're at this point where it's kind of floated, or the JFK point, and we have the people who are doing it who are proud Zionists, people that are literally the first thing Luna did was go and speak to Netanyahu. It's the same dynamic. And so are they going to release the information about a Mossad entity? Probably not. And if let's just say they do release everything, but they pretend he's not Mossad. Well, is that a win? If it's selectively hiding the most important point, in my opinion, or that JFK was killed by Israel. I mean, these are things that the evidence has been showing for a very long time. So I doubt that's ever going to come to pass, is my point.
Those are fantastic points. And I love it. I just want to note this because I've seen you mention this the same multiple times. I love how libertarians have the same dynamic with Republicans and I have with the DSA left, where I'll criticize Democrats for doing stuff like fucking genocide. They're like, oh, you going after Democrats for genocide. You must love Trump and Republicans. And I think it's hilarious how you mentioned how Republicans accuse you of wanting to help the Democrats. And this brings up or proves the point I've been making, how both sides of the duopoly have this same lizard brain of lesser two evilism. Mm-hmm. When I press Ian Carroll, when I press Dave Smith about their support for the Zionists known as Trump, they went to lesser two evilism while we had no choice other than Biden. Now, I want you guys to realize just how similar, even though they have cultural differences, just how similar the duopolies are. Right. And I'm going to show you guys this. And this is the person who was made, I think The title is FBI Deputy Director. And I would love you to speak about this because I have a lot of smoke for Candace Owens. That's a conversation for another day. People in my audience know why. But she has done a great service for the right because she woke so many people on the right up about the Israel. Yeah. So despite all my smoke I have for her, I will at least give her credit for that because she was a big driving voice of that.
She did.
Because people like this is being exposed. I would love to hear your thoughts on this as someone more on the libertarian right. But here is the new FBI director letting people know in public what his number one priority is. And he's not alone. You can find many people in the Trump administration saying the same thing. He's just the most recent hire. Look at this crazy clip here.
That's right. What cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel.
Didn't even finish the sentence.
What is number one? Right.
Like as you said, no hesitation.
Yeah. Just like you didn't finish the full sentence. Talk about Israel. Like just so immediate. Like, how was that even the first thing that you say? That's just so insane to me. As you know, first of all, by the way, I want to point this out. Like, I wouldn't see myself as libertarian right. I don't label myself or identify with any of these dynamics. I think I have positions that go all over the spectrum. I honestly think that's what anybody would do if they were not looking through a lens. You know what I mean? I think we all do it. We have our perceptions, but I think that, you know, it's weird to me that we end up choosing to kind of lean a certain way based on what we think our party does. And so I'm not saying that's anybody in your audience or you, but like in a general sense, we know that's what partisans do. But I just want to point that out because I don't see myself as right at all, especially not right now. But
okay, I didn't mean to miss. I didn't mean.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's common today with, you know, especially with a lot of things we talked about today. But so to this point, it's crazy that we have these people. And the larger point is not just Bongino, but all of them. Whether Kash Patel goes on and the first thing he says is we need to prioritize Israel. Like, you can't look, you can argue that you believe this is right. I don't know why that would make sense, but you can't pretend it's America first. It's just not. Okay. And then everything they're doing, they're committing a genocide. Not even getting into the current reality. Let's just go back through the last 70 years and what Israel's repeatedly done to the United States. There's so many different examples. So the idea that that's even a reality that we accept is crazy. If they all came out and said China, or how about just the UK as an ally? Wouldn't we be like, what? UK? That's weird, right? Why is it okay for them to say first thing? But so the point is, you broaden back out to the entire administration. You go through every single person in his inner circle, and they are outspokenly not just Zionists, but like prophetically pro. Like they have in many of them believe in like the second coming dynamic of the Zionist belief structure. Which, by the way, if you don't understand out there listening, that includes the collapse of the West. That is what they genuinely believe, that for that to happen, this country has to collapse. That is what people in his inner circle are supporting. The wildly prophetic idea that they think that they need to destroy this entire location, that they need to sacrifice a red heifer, that they've genetically engineered, that somehow, like all these weird dynamics are not godly. These are things that men are creating so that it looks as if this is a God-sent dynamic. For those that even know about like the red heifer point, like this is something that's it's in, you know, it's a biblical dynamic. And the point is that they are claiming like if you listen to Orthodox Jews that call out Zionism, the point is that this is supposed to be something that is a miracle, right? Not that they make through genetic engineering, but something that just is something that naturally happens. That's a sign, and they just make it genetically engineer a red cow to slaughter in 2025. I mean, it just shows you that these are people that have been abusing this dynamic, and more Jewish people in the world than I've ever seen are waking up to that and calling out Zionism right now. And it makes me happy to see, because it's not about racism, guys. It's about highlighting a political ideology that is toxic, and people are seeing it.
Christians believe that Jerusalem and Israel is the Holy Land. So the solution of evangelical Christians is to soil the Holy Land with the blood of Christian children, because you guys know a lot of Palestinians are Christians. So that point alone, you are soiling the Holy Land with a war. It is blasphemy of the highest order. And I actually tend to avoid the religious argument, but this is something that Kwame Ture does a lot. You can destroy Zionism morally, ethically, legally, using religious argument. There is no moral, intellectual, or legal defense of Zionism, as Malcolm X famously said. And now I think there was a tech issue I saw in the chat later, much later, unfortunately, that a lot of people couldn't see this video. So thank you for people in the chat. Let me know. Sometimes those tech issues happen. Let me play the video again. And this year, and your breakdown was incredible, but this year, the scourge of Christian Zionism, which we have seen generations of Israeli. I think the most recent generation is probably the most crazed because of their propaganda. They're taught from an early age to hate Palestinians and wish death upon people who oppose the state of Israel. There was also brainwashing among Christian Zionism. This is also go to what you break down as well. People have been taught false gospel to believe in this fucking long-standing Holy Land, Israel, that existed only for 75, 80 years. So here, let's play the video here, and hopefully it works this time. Is it really not working again?
It played again. It started playing.
Yeah, let me just refresh it because people in the chat. I don't know what's going on. Let me try it again. Hopefully it works.
I might have it.
Your screen is black. Yeah, I see it on the other screen.
I've got it on mine. You try to play mine. See if that works.
Oh, you got it too. Let me play it.
Yeah, I just played it the other day.
Right.
There it goes.
Oh wait, dang, my bad. Let's
Dear to your heart.
Cause is dear to my Israel. Defense of Israel.
What is number one?
Defense of Israel.
The defense of Israel. So
we said Israel real quickly, reflectively, and then defense of Israel, because I think you've recognized even that was a little bit too much. But yeah, to your point though, the Zionism, it's interesting because as you were I think getting to, Zionism is not a religion. It's a political ideology, right? And it is co-opted Judaism. And this is what a lot of Orthodox Jewish communities have been calling out for a very long time. In fact, plenty were calling out right in the beginning. And just the propaganda has continued. Herzl himself is an atheist. Very easy to look up. He also was writing a whole bunch of very terrible things about Jewish people. He's the founder of Zionism. It's all been a very clearly documented manipulation that's only for, I don't even know how it's possible that after 70-something years that we can now only just now see this begin to start falling down. It's a testament to propaganda, really. But how they ever did it with the clumsy propaganda they're putting out today, I have no idea. But it's kind of crazy. And my worry is the fact that it's not just that it's being allowed to commit this genocide. That's obviously more than enough. It's insane. It's the worst part. But that it is so clearly influenced into not just the United States. That's like a picture. That's like the most evidence thing I can see. But Germany, right? Or any number of countries where you can see the unbelievable influence on not just what they say, but their policy, and people call that out. Or how about regime changes in places like Egypt, for example, where they put Sisi in place, and the people don't support Israel, but the president makes an agreement. This is happening and has been happening for a very long time. And this is, again, I've been saying this for a while, but it's not, the game is always to make this about racism. It's not. This is the issue of our time, guys. Like what we're seeing here is related to everything that we've always been trying to fight or deal with, like from foreign policy to the political domestic issues, from immigration, weaponized migration. It's just, everything. So that's my rant.
I strongly agree. I have mentioned many times before that we need a very strong, united front against Zionism. It's the scourge of our lifetime. It's the battle of our lifetime. So very, very well said. And what's extremely disturbing about that video is how, once again, not only how fast he says Israel, but it's not the prosperity of the working class. I think, my screen really still messing up again? This is very frustrating. But not I think they can't see. Can you guys see the screen? Let me know in the chat. Let me know if you guys can see it. Let me pull up my alternate screen. But not his answer. I don't know why the YouTube feed is not working right today. I'm not sure what's going on. But it wasn't the prosperity of the working class not getting people healthcare, getting people housing. I could list so many, but the first thing was Israel, and that goes to the traitorous ideology of Zionism. Is the priority of being Israel first. Mm-hmm. And the tweet I'll try to put up there, I might see. I'm gonna put the link in the private chat so you can share it, since you know how to do it.
I saw the JD Vance tweet. Is that what you're talking about? I saw that up.
Yeah, I put the link there. Do you mind sharing that? You know how to do it, right?
Let me see.
So, because I want to see if I can put this tweet up. Plus, I want to see if I can play the video, because I want to show the video, Trump AI video. So hopefully, I'm gonna put the next video in the chat too. I appreciate your help. I don't know what. It's a very weird.
Streamer has been acting a little funky lately. I was talking about somebody else earlier.
So let me know if you guys can see this, guys. Thank God I was keeping my eye on the chat today. This is the tweet I meant to bring up, because JD Vance went on this whole spill, which shows the hypocrisy of these people. These same people will accuse someone who I got a lot of criticism of as well, Ilhan Omar. They would say, "Oh, Ilhan Omar has dual loyalty to Somalia."
Yeah.
Even though I don't know
Incredible.
how many of you guys know this, but many people in the Somali community can't stand Ilhan Omar. They view her as a traitor who supported Joe Biden, even though he launched bombs on his country. She supported the U.S.-backed puppet. So the accusation, even that she like some sort of Somali traitor, is crazy. The same accusation is given to Rashid Tlaib, even though she condemned resistance, Palestinian resistance. So it's something that they always project. This tweet by J.D. Vance, and I'm skipping a lot of this because he starts with this bullshit story that definitely didn't happen. About some Ukrainian confronted me, saying that you're trying to abandon my country. He said, I always found it offensive that a new immigrant to our country will be willing to use the power and influence of their new nation to settle the ethnic rivalries of old. Who's he describing, guys?
Yeah, right.
What?
Exactly. Like, and look, I actually believe that that's not by accident. Like, you probably saw the Bill Maher clip going around as well, right? Where he criticizes, I forget her name. I forget her name now, from the squad as well, for being Palestinian supporter. You know, and literally like. I don't think he actually says dual loyalty, but he outlines exactly that. And it's just like, I mean, you don't think he knows the conversation? Like, that's not by accident. And it's happening at a very important time. And so him to outline that exactly, I think these people are being put to that. That's my opinion, but for obvious, clear reasons. They're all being funded. So you can consider that to be the obvious reason why. But it's interesting because your obvious point is the dual loyalty dynamic. Well, just say this first. Should matter no matter where you're from. That's obvious. I don't care if from Somalia, Russia, or China, or Israel. It should obviously matter whether the point is that if you're in a political position that has influence and power, at some point, it's almost inevitable, especially with our chief ally, that you're going to come to a decision that you'll be pulled in both directions. And you'll then have to decide, do I want to lean more towards Israel or do I want to lean more towards the United States? Now, it's alarming with someone like Brian Mast, who's literally an IDF member who is in Congress. That doesn't exist in any other dynamic that I can see in the world, and that's wild. But there are so many dual loyalty citizens in this country. And I'm not talking about Jewish. I'm talking about Israeli citizens. That's what I'm talking about. And so the important part about this is in Australia, for example, you might have seen this. WikiLeaks just posted this. Australia just literally stripped a man of their top secret clearance because he admitted under oath that he would give Israel information before, whether or not it was top secret, but let them know afterward. He admitted that. He said it many times. And so, and this is one of the biggest examples of somebody literally acknowledging on the record that he has loyalty to Israel, even though he's basically the same conversation we were just having. And so that is logical. Now, if he was from China, nobody would bat an eye. But because he's from Israel, everyone's making it a racial issue. It's like, guys, it's about top clearance. And he just told you he would give the information away. So this is such an obvious problem. And the reality is, for those that may not know, it is not a hypothetical. It has been ongoing. It has been documented. And we've also seen Israel doing things like Trump's last administration. You may not have known this, but Israel got caught putting spy devices at the White House. That was a very public story. And it's like, nobody even cared. It's insane.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm having some issues today. I was about to show the Trump AI video, the Gaza video. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen it. Unfortunately, I can't get anything to work. This is the first time I had this glitch. I'm not sure how to fix it right now, but luckily enough, we already around the 1 hour mark already. There was already a very thought-provoking conversation. So unfortunately, I won't be able to play the video, guys, simply because some glitch going on with the software. So I'm going to ask you about the AI video simply. If you guys don't know, Trump posted his AI video with like these Muslim trans people dancing in Gaza. Trump, Elon, and Netanyahu is like on a date or whatever. It's extremely creepy. It's literally them just outlining their plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza and build a resort on the blood of Palestinian children.
Can you play
I'm
that?
gonna see if I can get this to work, but unfortunately, it has been working.
I can see
even
it.
if I shared it from you, but let's see if they can see it.
Donald's coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels,
Let me
no
know
more
if you're
fear.
working.
Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, #1.
Wow.
Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, #1.
Wow.
That is disgusting, man.
I mean, and the point you made actually right here is you could see, and this is what so I think Sonia I talked to this morning made this point right there. Dancing women with beards. I mean, what it's like, that's crazy. And Trump shared this, right? He shared it himself. This is just grotesque, man. This is wrong in so many ways. Not even the least of which is that, or I think most important is that they're literally talking about a territory that they destroyed. I'm talking US government and Israel's government destroyed. And now we're using that as the justification for why it needs to be rebuilt. Like, what world do we exist in, guys? How is that possible? Or that the world can collectively see. And I mean that. That's one of the most objective things we can see today, that most peoples of countries and even most governments are seeing and calling out what Israel's doing. And yet the West just lets it continue and funds it, starts attacking people that are calling it out, goes after human rights groups that want to make an issue about it. Like, it's just like, this is history where a revolution would happen. But I'm of the mind that that's not what we need violently today. Actually, that may be an interesting thing we should talk about in another episode. Maybe I can have you on to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because the idea of a revolution is violent is such an interesting thing today, because that's what they use to affect. So I think they want that from us so they can shut it down and blame us for being terrorists. You know what I mean? But it's
I would love to talk about that with you. I'll always be down to join the show. We definitely gotta have you back on, because there's always much to discuss. Regarding that video, I haven't seen a lot of people in MAGA world get upset at this. It's stomach turning. Yeah. But what we are seeing right now is exactly why the Democratic Party is the most effective evil. Because I'm seeing
evil, you said?
The most effective, as my brother Glenn Ford said, because I have seen MSNBC and CNN cover Gaza, use term like the Nakba for the first time ever. They're using term like ethnic cleansing, which they never used under Joe Biden. So what we're seeing right now under Donald Trump is the aggressive, unapologetic face of the empire that doesn't try to hide their intention with flowery language. So you guys realize Joe Biden still, no matter what Trump has done, he will always be known as the worst president of all time, because he's the one who killed, and this is according to what Trump leaked, 500,000 Palestinians. 500,000 Palestinians were killed because he was hiding it under the veneer of human rights. He was fooling idiots that, we're going to allow Israel to investigate themselves. We are going to uphold human rights. But unlike Democrats, Trump and the Republicans, they outright say what they want to do. We need to bulldoze Gaza. We need to take over Greenland. You know what I mean? We need to get ready to engage China and Taiwan. There's no veneer of the human rights. And now the world is shocked because of this. Europe is shocked because of Trump. You have countries that are now looking toward China because they're so mind-fucked with the crazy terrorists, the tariffs, the crazy rhetoric. And that's why generally the Democrats are the most competent managers of the violent empire. Trump is the aggressive face. But even by putting out these videos, I'm seeing so much coverage about this that would have happened under Biden. That's my initial take. Obviously, the video is disgusting. Obviously, we know MAGA is genocidal, psychotic cult, the same as the Democratic Party, which is exactly why we got to oppose them in a duopoly. But Ryan, I'll pass to you for your last thoughts. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. We definitely got to do this again. Very enjoyable conversation. Trust me, we just scratched the surface. This is our first time talking, so we just scratched the surface, and I would love to have you back on again.
Well, last thoughts on that. Yeah, last thoughts on that is just, I see where you went with that too, and it's because I wasn't sure if it was going to be like more effective in like really it's the same point, like executing the agenda versus, but like your point is like the way that they can sell it, right? And that Trump, like this is what I agree that people often point out that as much as Trump can be more belligerent, at least he shows you, like he pulls the mask off and it's like, we're taking the oil. It's like, well, fuck, you just said it out loud. They're doing it, And so that is a positive. But my point is the same as I said before. I see it as one thing. It is one tactic. And as we already highlighted in the show, it's how it uses it, right? So they come out with this, it's going from senile, decrepit Joe Biden to blustering fascist Donald Trump. And it's like this, it's crazy. And so the point is that it's almost like we talked about with the ideology. It keeps you constantly feeling, you know what it is? It's almost like a release valve for feeling like we had a little mini revolution every 4 years. We did it. We took back the power from the bad guys we don't like. And it just keeps going back and forth. You know what I mean? It's like that's what that feels like. And so my thing is that they use both of them. And so whether Trump and Biden know that, I argue they probably do to some degree, but I think it is absolutely used in a way that keeps you on the hamster wheel, And so at the very least, whether it's, whatever your opinion or direction, at least just consider that it's something other than going through the same old motions, the partisan dynamic, the same, that we're trapped and it doesn't change no matter what we do. And I think everyone's beginning to pay attention to that. So ideological differences aside, I think we can all realize that we're all being, driven into some control structure that is benefiting nobody but the power structure. So thanks for having me on, brother. I did enjoy it.
Very well said. Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to shout out before we wrap up?
No, that's it. Just check out thelastamericanvagabond.com and check out, Independent Media Alliance and independent media and your platform as well, and continue to support people like us that are challenging, really just fight for what we believe in. I think that's what's important.
Absolutely. It was great to have you on. We have another banger on Friday, another show with Lee Camp. He'll be joining me again. He has a new show that he just came out with, Unredacted Tonight. It's great to see Lee Camp back doing his thing, man. He's an OG when he come out calling out the empire and both parties. We always have fun doing on shows, so we're gonna have another Nick and Lee Camp show for Friday. So that's gonna be another banger. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. Make sure you guys check out The Last American Vagabond. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Take care, y'all.